of advice do you have to homeowners?
Practicing that preparedness. Starting the conversation now is always going to be a benefit to any association out there.
And welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery. And you guessed it, we are live here in Texas with Rob Bowlby, president of GlobalPro Texas. Thanks so much for joining us here today, Rob.
Welcome back to Texas, Dan.
Man, it's good to be back. Weather is it's changing, right? The seasons are changing. Our sinuses are feeling it. But we're excited to be here to share with you guys so much of the exciting stuff that's going on here in the market, whether it's in Texas itself, South Florida, and the other markets we serve. We want to always make sure that you have the information you can use, and that's what this is all about. So again, thanks for joining us here today. Let's just jump right into it. Let's start talking about the topic today is mitigation do's and don'ts. We're seeing a lot of rain out there. We're seeing the weather change. It's getting colder. The seasons are happening. We're getting the phone calls about the water damages and the water losses that are happening with the roofs failing, the windows failing, potential flooding, flash flooding in certain areas. So there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving pieces, the migration of the snowbirds coming down from south. I know a lot of them have relocated to these regions, whether it's Dallas or Florida. But Rob, what are you seeing as far as the migration going on and the changes in the population density? Is it growing here in Texas?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously, and you hear it in all the news stories, Texas is one of the top states in the country for relocation, particularly from California. So California is actually the #1 state for relocation to Texas right now. Interestingly, this surprised me. Florida was number 2. I was surprised by that. I don't know if that means you're moving to Florida sometime soon. But Florida was the #2 state. So we have a lot of people coming in and a lot of people buying houses. We talked about housing last time. Another article in today's Dallas Morning News: home prices up 20% year over year here in Dallas, and that's 100% driven by just the in-migration. You can sell your $3 million home in Dallas at in California at about 2,700 square feet and double that square footage, if not more, here in Dallas, Texas.
Wow, a lot of changes, a lot of things happening. Now on the weather, the weather's changing, right? We had the freeze here in Dallas, North Texas area, a lot of other stuff going. So I want to talk about the mitigation do's, then I want to start talking about some don'ts. So let's hit on the do's, right? So we have a big campaign. You probably heard us say it before if you've been tuning in or if you've seen us at the trade shows, BizNow events. We are out there sharing our experience with the community, talking about call us first. We want to make sure that you understand what that means or why we're even saying that. We're hearing about mitigation companies running out there, jamming contracts in front of community associations, business owners to mitigate water damage to their property, but also built into those contracts is our assignment of benefits and the rights for them to communicate directly with the insurance company on your behalf. In a lot of regards, they're engaging these insurance companies in the actual negotiation of your claims, right? So one of the do's you want to do is look at the contract, read it, understand what you're assigning to them, what rights you're assigning over to them, and what role they're going to play in your claim. It's a really, really important one. It's a simple fact that by calling us first, you're going to have the right information when you need it, and you're going to be able to effectively manage your claim, your recovery of the money, and rebuilding. We get a lot of confusion regarding the idea of rebuilding versus recovering. Oh, I just want to recover from my loss. Recovering from a loss with regards to insurance is getting paid by your insurance company. It's recovering the money. It's not the sticks and bricks, the physical sticks and bricks going back. That's rebuilding. But you can't rebuild until you've recovered, until you've gotten paid the money you're entitled to from your insurance company through your insurance policy. So make sure that you are recovering before you rebuild. Since when have you started a construction project without knowing what your budget is or how much money you have to spend? Unfortunately, a lot of community associations, particularly, or business owners, launch into the rebuilding phase before they've recovered the money they're entitled to on insurance. They have no idea how much to spend. Rob, could you imagine managing a business and just spending money without actually knowing how much money you have to actually spend it? I mean, really not a good business tactic, right?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So make sure that you understand how much money you have to spend, and then you can start the rebuilding. So simple thing, call us first. Let us guide you through the process. We heard just recently from an association that we've represented in the past that was convinced by an actual construction company to go ahead and allow them to mitigate and start to rebuild. And the reason why they said is that, we don't want to slow down the process. And then we had to remind that association that we have actually had to reopen 4 prior claims that they have poorly managed with this same contractor, which has led to underpayment and issues with regards to their efforts and ability to rebuild. We had to go back and basically start over. And starting over is never a good thing. I mean, Rob, could you imagine being a business owner or being an association and having to, stop rebuilding? I mean, if you lived in a community association, is that something you want to deal with?
Absolutely not.
I mean, let's talk about some of the issues that may can cause, right? So from an association standpoint, you're, as a manager or a president of the association, you're having to tell your neighbors, hey guys, I know we were going to start rebuilding, but we can't do that right now because we actually don't have the money, and we've already spent all the money the insurance company gave us. But now the contractor, because of the increasing costs and the demands for materials and labor, have gotten out of control, and now we can't get them. I mean, what is going on right now in the Texas market with regards to labor and material, and why might someone not want to start rebuilding until they figured out how much money they're going to get paid?
Well, we talked about that a little bit last week, that the biggest issue facing any industry right now in construction is just the skyrocketing cost of materials. And by the time you get through the claim process, you've got your money from the insurance company, but now your contract costs have increased 10 to sometimes 25%. You still don't have enough money to finish the project.
Right. So there's this tail end issue, right? So you're recovering today. Next thing you know, you're turning around trying to get labor and material, and you can't. And there's a massive increased cost associated with doing those things. And you've run ahead and done this, which is to the benefit of the contractor, right? Because they're just trying to secure the job, right? They just want to make sure you don't go somewhere else. But the reality is that you may end up with a shortage in your recovery and not be able to effectively rebuild. And you don't want to get in that situation. Also, coverage, right? Your contractor doesn't decide what is covered. So one of the major dues is determining that, in fact, you have coverage for what they want to rebuild. And if you allow them to just simply start rebuilding and coverage has yet to be determined, you're going to end up in a worse off situation, a shortage in your actual recovery, not be able to actually pay for it, and potentially they may even walk off the job because you stopped paying them, demanding that their insurance company do something about it. But they're not the keepers of coverage, right? So the insurance company makes decisions. So just make sure that you go through the process of adjusting the claim first. And also, it's a really simple, stupid thing. Take your own photographs, right? Take your own videos. I can't tell you how many times that the managers don't want to get up out of their seat, don't want to walk the properties, don't want to identify what the damage is, don't want to do a full scope of the issue or identify the full scope of the issues themselves, and are relying on the contractor. Again, you're putting that in their hands, but they are not the ones to decide what you get paid and when you get paid. So again, be careful of signing your rights over, and also be careful of relying on them to make sure they guide you through that whole process. So some other quick don'ts.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, no,
let's
because
I feel like you touched on it briefly, but there's really a step before that, because as a consumer, if you read the insurance policy, water damage is one of those really tricky areas. Some parts of the policy you read, it's covered. Other parts of the policy, it's excluded. So I'd like to hear you talk about just a couple minutes about why it's so important, specifically how you file the claim. Because you can file the claim one way, and the coverage is going to be denied. You can file the claim another way, and you will likely get coverage. And I think people forget that, and instead say, well, I'm going to file the claim, and then if it gets denied, then I'll call a company like GlobalPro.
It's a really important point, and I'm glad you brought it up, Robin. It's funny is that when I look at the incident reports and I look at the loss runs for associations all the time, I see on there a lot of times the word leak, right? And leak within the context of insurance policy most often is construed to be something long-term ongoing and therefore not covered, right? So it's just a simple, but in everyday conversation, we say the word leak to, our neighbors and to our managers and whomever, but within the context of insurance, if something's construed to be long-term and ongoing, then therefore not covered. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to instantly deny your claim or not pay you everything you're entitled to, but I can tell you that it could potentially lead to significant delays more often than not, and that's the situation, right? It's like more often than not, so you're likely to experience delay because of the words you're using to describe your damages. And something may be caused by construction or ensuing damage, but most people don't use, hey, I have an ensuing water loss, right? But again, within context of insurance, the ensuing damage caused by construction is covered in most instances. And in being able to articulate and explain and describe the damage in that way, what can lead to better recovery, more timely recovery, and that's something your contractor, right, is not going to do for you. It's something your broker is not going to do for you. And I mean, how many people out there, I mean, Rob, have you experienced when you had a water loss or whatever else, your broker coming out to your property?
No, never came.
Right. So how is it that your broker is going to be the one that reports this or identifies the damages, just like the contractor, right? Contractors focus on just cutting drywall because that's how they get paid, right? It's their focus is on getting paid. That's how they make money, whether it's from the insurance company or not. If you read the contracts, that's what's happening. So, and using these words can cause delays and issues. So making sure you fit in, it's a really good, don't use words that are going to prejudice you, right? And that can't occur though because you don't have a copy of your policy. So get a copy of your policy. So that's one of the do's, right? How many managers out there, business owners, have read through the provisions on water, right? There's new water endorsements, there's new water exclusions. What types of water damage and exclusions are applicable to your situation. Now we have wind-driven rain. Suddenly hurricane damage is something other than hurricane. It's so ridiculous, right? And here in Dallas, Texas, I mean, freezing pipes and water damage is caused by it. So are you reporting it as a frozen pipe or are you reporting it as a water loss?
Report it as a water loss.
Right. So it's just really confusing. But I mean, I know I've read and I've talked to many that have been damaged by the freeze, right? And they contacted their brokers or agents. And I even went on the Department of Insurance website for the state of Texas. And on there, it talks about, the complexities of the issue. But it unfortunately, I think it's a little misguided. It's saying to call your broker. But again, broker's not coming out. Right. Your broker most often doesn't have the insurance policy. So why am I...
He's not adjusting the claim.
Right.
He's not even as a representative of the insurance company, he's not the person involved with that claim.
Right.
It's a really different part.
Not even licensed to manage these things. So again, really complicated, really important issue, and something, a complexity or an issue that I feel a lot of people fall victim to, and they end up in these worse off situations. So it's really, really important that you take your time, go through this process, understand the role players, understand what we do, GlobalPro, call us first. This is just not just some fun campaign and a bunch of words we strung together to get you to listen to us. It's just proven fact that you are going to have a better recovery, a more timely recovery by calling us first, by making sure that you have people representing your interest there on site at the time that the loss occurs or shortly thereafter. We should be one of those phone calls, right? It should be, you call the mitigation company, you're calling 911, you're calling, but you're also calling insurance coverage experts to identify issues in potential claims, issues in the policies, things like that. So I want to transition the conversation a little bit away from mitigation do's and don'ts and kind of bring it back to Texas, talk about a little bit of the market update, talk about the weather changing. I mean, right now, Rob, it's crazy outside. I landed, I felt it, woke up torrential downpours. What are some of the issues that we saw through this last freeze that people should be kind of aware of now, and maybe some of the issues that they're contending with now, right here in Texas?
Well, so right now, so Dan, you had much better weather last time. This time, not quite as good. It is absolutely pouring out there today. It's probably going to do that all day. So when we think about Texas water losses, we tend to think in three categories: flooding, and we could probably do a whole show on what's covered under your flood policy.
And we will.
You should probably have a flood policy
We will.
if you don't live in a floodplain, and what's not covered under your flood policy. But the other two are roof leaks. I mean, right now we've got a ton of rain, we've got a ton of old roofs out there, and just sprinkler system failures as we get into the winter season in Texas. Now, they call that a 100-year freeze last year. Who knows? We are seeing more extreme weather events happen more frequently in all of our markets, but it does freeze in Texas a little bit every year. I mean, we get down in the 20s almost every year here in North Texas.
Yeah, so a lot of weather, a lot of things to be paying attention to. You just heard us talk about the use of words to describe different things. It's really important that, yeah, there may have been a freeze, but what actually caused damage, and within the context of your policy, what is actually covered. Again, I think the word flood takes on many different meanings, right? Oh my God, my whole house flooded. Well, but within the context of insurance, it may not have been a flood, and that's something really important to understand, that it just is still considered, per definition of the contract, your insurance policy, a water loss. So just, again, for all those listening to this, and our one takeaway, right, is that in looking at the policy, words get their, the meaning from words around them, and it's really important that you understand that within the context of your policy, those words that we may use on a daily basis in our conversations may not be the words that trigger coverage. So using the right words and reporting the claims accurately will lead to timely and better recovery. And it's really important that you get the best recovery from the product that you pay all of this money for. And our rates are going up right here in Texas and South Florida markets. I mean, you're seeing major increases in rates. And it's really, really important to do that. We had, the pipe freeze. Like, people are still fighting these claims, right? I mean, that's still an issue. And I have to believe, Rob, that a lot of it has to do with the way in which the claims are reported and how they're being managed, or the lack of management, because they don't have insurance coverage experts there walking through the process from initial reporting the claim to adjusting the claim to identifying the damages to making sure that they understand what they're paid for, what they're not paid for. Right. There's some complexities. Well, and Dallas is exploding right now, right? There's all kinds of new developments. So let's talk about some of the new development projects that are going on right now in Dallas, Texas.
Sure. So last time we talked about housing. This time we're going to talk about hospitality. So hospitality is really interesting right now. So if you've stayed in a hotel recently, you probably realize your room's not getting cleaned every day because there's a labor shortage. But the industry is still moving ahead with a lot of projects, particularly in growing metropolitan areas like Texas. So we've got 147 hotels in the pipeline here in North Texas. 58 of those are in Dallas. And probably one of the most anticipated projects in the pipeline is our first Mandarin Oriental hotel here in Dallas. Now, it's going to be one of those things we see in some of the major cities where you have the hotel itself, and then you have residences. You can actually buy a condo in the Mandarin Oriental Hotel and take advantage of all the amenities. And I know South Florida has a lot of those. You've had some experiences as to what insurance coverage looks like there, when it covers, when it doesn't. That might be helpful for everybody to hear.
Yeah, so it's a really complex situation, right? And we're covering a lot here today in our report. It's something we want to dive into deep, and I think we're going to definitely do a couple different segments, one on flooding, and this is definitely going to be one that we want to talk a lot about. But just to hit on it just a little bit, because we've been, Rob and I are tracking the market, seeing where the changes are occurring. This is something that you're seeing here, something that we contend with a lot in the Florida markets as well as in the New York metro area, where you have your commercial operators inside a community association or part of one, and then you have different associations, right? You have the community association for the condo association, you have the mass association, and then you have the business owner operator, which may be a tenant, or maybe an actual, the owner operator may be also, as part of it. So really important issue is to understand the insurable interest in certain common area elements, where the limited common area elements are, where the liability transition, who's responsible for maintaining something may be different than who's responsible for insuring it, right? So it's an important thing. We talk about a lot about matrix, right? So community association attorneys can at times put together these matrix where they'll break down these issues of maintenance versus insurable liability, and both on GL as well as property, and then where money's paid and who's going to be responsible for rebuilding too, which may be required of the person that's maintaining it, but the money to do it may come from the insurance that the other association or the business owner operator is purchasing. So really confusing set of facts, but for those that are going out and looking at these properties for potential investments or as homes, certainly ask these questions about how this operation is going to go on and who's responsible for what, because as you go into those different areas and use those amenities, for instance, if you have a beautiful Mandarin Oriental and they have a pool there, they're probably not going to build a second pool for the condo association. You're going to use the pool of the hotel, but there may be certain limitations to that. And then from an insurance perspective, as an incoming board member for the condo association, how is this going to work? If there's a slip and fall, if there's a maintenance issue, if there's a leak in the pool, if there's a failure in the sauna, which leads, one time we actually had a major water loss because they put a fire sprinkler in the sauna as part of a construction defect issue, really complex issue, but it was like the claims themselves were at a standstill for months in this newly turned over building, just trying to figure out who was actually supposed to buy the insurance and how they were supposed to deal with the claims and rebuilding, because the water from the actual issue went into the lobby area, and it was from the hotel area, and again, very complicated situation, and we had to work with counsel for the hotel operator and the different insurance policies to try to figure out, okay, who's responsible for what, who's getting paid what, and what's actually going to rebuild, and when it gets shut down, what does that mean for the fees you're paying? And on and on and on and on. And I can go on, and you can honestly tell how difficult this situation can get. We, as insurance coverage experts, working with these community associations from day one, we're able to anticipate these things. And I think that's what it is, right? Plan for the worst, expect the worst, and then you won't be so surprised when it happens.
Call us first.
Yeah, call us first, right? You heard it there from Rob, and I think that's a great note to end on. This has been a great segment to talk about a bunch of different issues, all packed into one episode. I'm excited to be here in Dallas, to be joined by Rob to talk about important issues that, well, quite frankly, aren't just isolated to either Texas or South Florida or the New York metro area or many of the other parts of the country that we here at GlobalPro, we serve as insurance coverage experts. But again, I'll reiterate it, call us first, know what your rights are, know what you're entitled to recovery, get a timely recovery. It's really important. And stop giving up your rights and responsibilities to a third party that are more interested in getting paid than you getting paid by your insurance and protecting your fellow unit owners, your neighbors, or your business. All right, you want to make sure you're protecting it and making sure that you're getting the recovery you're entitled to. Particularly now as the weather starts to transition, all these are important issues. We'll continue to cover them here at the Recovery Report Live. And if you haven't already, I'll be surprised if you haven't, hit the subscribe button, like us, follow us on all the social media. We're going to continue providing you actionable information that you can use. We're here every Thursday, 11 o'clock on Recovery Report Live. And I can't wait till next week, Rob.
You too.
All right, let's do it. We will see you guys then. Thank you so much again for joining us here on the Recovery Report Live.